As I sit in my brother's living room, my thoughts are dominated by the urge to escape a reality I once thought was authentic, but soon realized was an illusion, much like the Matrix. At the age of 34, I am faced with the challenges of raising 5 children as an unmarried individual, lacking career interests, and having lost all material possessions. In this state, I am left with no choice but to turn to God. How did I get here? It is a common saying that we do not choose to be born, and this holds true for me. I did not ask to be born, yet I arrived in this world as Leah Quiara Williams on July 9, 1990. My parents, Tashima M. Williams and Gary T. Williams, were newly married young adults when I was born. At the time, my mother was only 18 years old. I was born at Hutzel Hospital in downtown Detroit, Michigan. Although my memories from infancy are limited, I have a fairly clear recollection of my life from age 3 onwards. Throughout my childhood and adolescence, I remember my mother raising me as a single parent, with my grandmother providing consistent support and guidance. My family's history has been marked by significant hardships, particularly for my mother and grandmother, who both raised children as single parents. This phenomenon appears to have become a generational curse that has affected my family's lineage and must be addressed. My great-grandparents, who lived in the rural South during the era of slavery, worked diligently to raise 12 children on the land they owned. One of those children was my grandmother, Sarah J. Mack Slater, a truly remarkable woman. Despite the challenges she faced growing up in poverty with numerous siblings, she developed a range of skills, including vocal talents, sewing, cooking, and a strong work ethic. Although she never learned to read, she possessed a natural ability to create opportunities, prepare meals with scarce ingredients, and offer prayers that could protect, heal, and uplift. These gifts have been passed down through our family's generations and are an integral part of our DNA. Having spent her childhood in the southern United States, my grandmother was later raised by her older siblings, who, upon reaching adulthood, relocated to Newark, New Jersey, driven by a desire for new experiences. Growing up as a confident, adventurous, and strong-willed African-American woman in the 1960s and 1970s, my grandmother truly embodied the spirit of her time, and it was during this period that she had my uncle Maurice Mack and my mom Tashima. Sadly, all 3 of them have now departed. My grandmother and both her children passed away far too soon, and I will share more about their lives and tragic deaths later on. Back to Sarah J. Mack Slater. My grandmother was unlike most people. She had no patience for nonsense. She was a private person but could be blunt and outgoing when she chose to be. While friendly isn't the first word that comes to mind when describing her, those who got to know her well understood that she was a deeply loving person. She instilled these same qualities in her children. For instance, my uncle was notorious for speaking his mind, whereas my mom was exceptionally sweet. I can only imagine how challenging life must have been for them growing up in Newark. The city was plagued by crime, gang violence, and a rampant drug epidemic during that time. According to my grandma, things eventually became too much for her, particularly with my uncle getting into trouble in New Jersey. As a result, she made the difficult decision to relocate her teenage children to Detroit, Michigan, in search of a fresh start, but as we all know, you can't outrun your problems. I'm uncertain about the nature of my uncle's troubles, but they were severe enough to prompt my grandmother to relocate and escape the environment. However, I'm unsure if Detroit was a better alternative, but it was part of God's plan. In the city, Sarah established new friendships, secured a new job, found new medical professionals, a new church community, and adapted to her new surroundings, effectively making Detroit her new hometown for herself and her children. Detroit is similar to other urban cities, featuring a wide array of recreational destinations, as well as areas that are best avoided after a certain hour or when daylight fades. The city is distinguished by its picturesque scenery, historic landmarks, buildings, and residences that once housed famous celebrities. Detroit is also recognized for its exceptional restaurants, churches that serve the community, parks that create lasting memories with family, museums, and more. Nonetheless, the city faces challenges like corruption, crime, and racism, which can lead to associations with undesirable groups. To reiterate, transitioning from one location to another does not ensure freedom from comparable experiences. Occasionally, a spirit or curse may follow, requiring resolution to achieve tranquility. Moving forward, let's shift our focus to my mother, Tashima M. Williams. Being youthful, popular, and exceptionally attractive is one aspect, but it's quite another when you're from the city and a highly sought-after commodity. My mother was a newcomer to the Detroit streets at the tender age of 16. She was a young and talented individual who could sing with the voice of an angel. With the physique of a goddess, golden brown skin, and an irresistible presence, she was a standout. Prior to leaving her life in Newark, she was an active participant in various step teams, fashion shows, singing, and dance groups, consistently delivering impressive performances. Talent was not an area where my mother lacked skills, and upon arriving in Detroit, she was eager to showcase the abilities her mother had instilled in her. At the outset, my mother's high school years were spent at Cooley High School in Detroit. After moving to the city, she rapidly established a strong social network. Given her intellectual and stylish nature, she naturally became part of the school's popular clique. The anecdotes she shared about her teenage adventures highlighted her dynamic and daring personality. While relocating to a new state presented certain difficulties, including periodic episodes of homesickness, she adjusted to her new environment with remarkable agility. After a few months she was in there like swimwear, and of course a young tenderoni like herself caught the eyes of many men. The precise details of my parents' initial meeting are unknown to me, but it is apparent that their encounter ultimately led to my conception. My mom had just moved to Michigan at the age of 16, yet she was married to my father and pregnant with me by the time she turned 18. I'm not sure if it was love at first sight or teenage hormones that took over, but on July 9, 1990, a star was born. Me, Leah Quiara Williams, and I'm ready to tell my story. Y'all can call me Leah. This is my digital diary, and from here on out I'll be talking the way that I talk in real life. I may curse, I may talk a little ghetto, but if you want to know my story you'll follow along just fine. Lace up your shoes and grab your water. I'm about to take you on an adventure. Growing up in the 1990s was a unique experience. I had a typical childhood for a young African American kid growing up in a single-parent household in an urban neighborhood, with my mother as the primary caregiver. While life was not always easy, I have fond memories of my childhood. I recall spending most of my time with my mother, who was not only my parent but also my closest friend. We shared deep conversations on various topics, and I appreciated her youthful energy, which often led people to mistake her for my older sister. Whenever my mother attended events, my younger brother Denzel and I were always by her side. As the firstborn, I am 3 years older than Denzel, and we have different fathers, which suggests that my parents' marriage was short-lived. Denzel was born a month before I turned 3 years old. As stated earlier, I can remember a large percentage of my childhood and adulthood. From about the age of 3 until this very moment to be exact. Today is May 1, 2025, by the way, and it's currently 11:52 a.m. here in Detroit, Michigan. I am 34 years old as I write this daily entry. Anyways, back to the story. I remember my mom bringing my brother home from the hospital. He was born prematurely, so he was hospitalized for a few months after delivery. He was in an infant incubator and NICU, neonatal intensive care unit, until he gained enough weight and his organs developed enough for him to come home. My mother and I would go up to the hospital to visit him, and I was happy for him to be free. At the time of my brother's birth, we were living with Denzel's father. For respect of his privacy, I won't mention his name. My mother was 21 years old at this time, and she was now with 2 children. I loved my mother and my baby brother, but I despised his dad. I hated living with him. He was so mean to me, and he wasn't in love with my mom. I'm not sure how they ended up together, but all I can remember is the way she looked at him with disgust and fear while he looked at her and had no problem expressing his anger towards her with his fist. He was so wish-washy. Some days I felt as if he might have liked her a little, and other days I'd cry and beg her to leave him. I was so terrified of him when he'd drink and get upset. He'd fight my mom, yell at me, and sometimes he'd grab his guns and shoot off in the air. The intimidation tactics still weren't enough for my mom to leave. I don't know if she was scared to leave or if she had low self-esteem. However, I'd always ask her why wouldn't she find us somewhere else to go. One night she was arguing with his dad, and he grabbed his gun and shot it at my mother's foot as she was running down the stairs with my brother in her arms. Her shoe flopped off due to it being untied, and the bullet went through her shoe. I was screaming at the top of my lungs. I was only 3 and I was afraid. So many things were running through my mind. I asked my mother to call my grandmother and to have her pick me up. I cried all the way until my grandma arrived. I wanted my mom and my brother to come with me, but she stayed there instead. The domestic violence between the 2 of them were non-stop. It lasted for years, and even after my mother finally gathered up the strength to leave him, it still wasn't easy to escape the drama. When my mother became overwhelmed, we stayed with my grandmother briefly before relocating to a shelter, where we remained until she secured Section 8 housing. Her kidney failure led to disability, and she was promptly approved for disability benefits, dialysis, and Section 8 simultaneously. Our 3-month stay at the shelter was extremely difficult. At 7 or 8 years old and in the 3rd grade, walking to school from the shelter was not easy. Denzel, who was in kindergarten, seemed less aware of our situation. Nonetheless, I remember walking to school with other children from the shelter. Regrettably, our classmates who did not reside at the shelter would frequently tease and mock those of us who did. My mom did her best to maintain our appearances despite our difficult situation. Even though we were living in a shelter, she ensured we attended school looking presentable. I still recall being at the shelter and my mom speaking with her caseworker while applying for government assistance. The worker asked my mom why she needed assistance when she was well-dressed and had her hair done. My mom responded by asking if she needed to appear destitute before receiving help. It's astonishing how people often require others to have nothing before offering assistance. Anyway, we were approved for Section 8 by the time I was 8 years old. My mom was undergoing dialysis and sometimes felt too weak and tired to drive. In those days, we had to drive around searching for houses with for rent signs, as we couldn't use housing or apartment apps. My mother's determination was inspiring as she coped with dialysis treatment. Despite her health struggles, she remained committed to finding a new home for us, and we eventually discovered a suitable property in Brightmoor. Our new residence was on Rockdale Street, near a park where I had formed lasting memories with my brother, cousin, and friends. However, that same park was also the site of a painful incident in which Denzel jumped on my back, causing me to chip my front teeth on the metal slide. Anyways, I admired my mother's strength in overcoming adversity. Nevertheless, just as we were starting to settle into our new life, my brother's father reappeared, bringing his abusive behavior back into our lives. His presence disrupted the tranquility we had briefly enjoyed in our new home, and my mother was forced to endure further suffering. In addition, a disturbing incident involving my cousins occurred shortly after our move. They had been left unattended by my uncle while he was at work, prompting their mother to contact CPS and report child neglect. As a result, my cousins were taken to a police station, and my mother had to act quickly to prevent them from being placed in foster care. It was as if we couldn't win for losing. No matter how hard my mom tried to make life better for us, shit just kept happening. Talk about a generational curse. Ultimately, my cousins moved in with us, and I was more than happy to have them live with us. Their presence didn't bother me, but it did require regular visits from child services to ensure that my mother was meeting all the necessary requirements of being a guardian until my uncle could regain custody. My mother, who was already a single parent dealing with a tough situation, generously welcomed her nieces into our home, treating them as if they were her own children. This made things even more difficult for us. When the child services worker came for unannounced visits, my mom would sometimes be at dialysis. On those days, we knew what to expect. If we heard a knock at the door that we weren't expecting, we would hide under the beds and stay quiet until the visitor left. We didn't want to be taken away by the system, so when the government representative came, we hid, much like slaves or Christians fleeing from persecution. Despite the difficulties we encountered, we made life as smooth as possible. Upon moving into our home, we quickly registered at the nearby school, Hubert Elementary. This is where I finished my 3rd grade year. My teacher was Miss Stevenson. She had light skin and blonde hair, styled in a pixie cut, a characteristic typical of her era. The following year, I attended the 4th grade classroom located next to hers. My 4th grade teacher's name was Miss Jones. Her classroom remains etched in my memory to this day. She was my favorite teacher, and her class was never boring. She made learning a memorable experience. I recall being bullied in her class, a popular boy named Diego being the reason. Diego was a dark-skinned boy with striking white teeth, and his demeanor suggested that he was accustomed to receiving special treatment. He consistently wore the finest attire, exuding an air of confidence that was uncommon among fourth graders. His charm and charisma reminded me of a young Biggie Smalls. Despite his popularity, Diego took a liking to me, as I was the quiet and observant girl in class. My reserved nature often led to me being labeled as the teacher's pet throughout my academic career. However, there was another girl in our class who harbored feelings for Diego and grew hostile towards me whenever she saw us interacting. Her behavior was marked by a desire for attention, and she frequently attempted to disrupt our conversations by calling me derogatory names. Her actions were a clear manifestation of her insecurity and need for validation. In our class, there was another individual named Anthony who harbored romantic feelings towards me. His mother had a professional connection to my mother, having worked at the dialysis center where she received treatment. Anthony and I are still connected on Instagram. He showed remarkable kindness towards me, giving me his lunch money every day. Anthony's family was very stable and secure. I received free lunch due to my mother's health issues and limited financial resources, while Anthony's family was more affluent, resulting in his lunch costing around $2 daily. Anthony would come to school with $4 each day, generously offering me either $2 or the full amount without hesitation. One day I happened to be talking to Anthony and Diego because we all sat at the table together. Latrice came and spit at me, and she started calling me all types of names as if I could really be a whore in the 4th grade. I started crying and Miss Jones pulled me to the side and she wiped my eyes. She said, "Leah, you're going to be such a beautiful woman when you grow up. You're not fat, you're what grown people my age call thick with childbearing hips." She said, "You'll understand once you get older and start dating guys for real." She said, "You're crying now but you'll get the last laugh later. Watch what I tell you."